welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and today I will be doing my February TBR. So I read 16 books in the month of February, 0 1-star books, 2 2-star books, 3 3-star books, 6 4-star books, and 5 5-star books, making the total for my month a 4.03 stars as an average. I read 5,673 pages this month, which totals out to about 202 pages per day. However, I want to reiterate that I did read half of Game of Thrones in January, so that statistic might be a little off. And just for fun, I like to go into the age range of my novels and the gender of the authors for my novels. So I read 7 female authors and 8 male authors this month, 11 adult novels, and 5 YA novels, and that includes the mangas that I read as well. So let's get into it. Like I said, the first book I finished in the month of February was A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, if you don't know what Game of Thrones is about, it's a high fantasy novel that stems around a bunch of families in the court. King's family, the Starks, the Lannisters, blah 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 blah. I could go on forever. And I'm doing the reread with the Song of Ice and Fire read along that's going on before the final season comes out. Clearly, I had a lot of thoughts. I went into this with the goal of annotating and searching for foreshadowing, searching for moments in between characters that I love, searching for sad moments. As you can see towards the end of the book, it's a lot of sad moments. But yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I don't think I could give it any other rating. I'm very attached to the series. I think George R.R. Martin is a very talented author. I think the way he builds his world is incredible. So I don't see myself giving this anything but a 5 stars. I think it's fantastic. I might be biased because I love it so much, but obviously I see the bad things in it, but I can't bring myself to give it any lower. The next book I read in the month of February was Brother by David Shariandri. This is a story that follows 2 brothers in Scarborough, Ontario, and how they grow up kind of in what is the Bronx of Scarborough. I don't want to spoil it, but it's basically a story about 2 brothers and the repercussions of being a minority in a white country, I guess you could say. So from page 1, the story really gripped me. It's a story about family, it's a story about immigration, it's a story about Canada, and it's a story about the police brutality we have here and the mistreatment of minority races that we do here. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when going in because Canada isn't perfect. Shariandri carefully weaves together this story of loss with a beautiful prose that pulls your heartstrings as you're reading it. My one complaint for the novel, I didn't even tell you what I rated this. I rated it 4 stars, and the reason I knocked off 1 star is that I felt like it was too short, and I wish that we had more time with Michael and Francis because their relationship is something I really wanted to closely examine and really get involved with, and I think we didn't spend enough time with them. But overall, it was an obviously incredible and beautiful novel. The next book I read was Sense and Sensibility from Jane Austen. This is a story about 2 sisters, Marianne and Eleanor, and their lives as they navigate kind of 18th century England in the search for husbands. I give this 3.5 stars. It definitely did surprise me. I didn't expect to enjoy this. I didn't know what this was going in, but I actually really did. I did have a good time reading this. I think part of the reason why I enjoyed it so much was because I identified with the older sister character in this novel, Eleanor, so heartedly. She puts a lot about what was going on in her life in the back burner so that she can help Marianne with her problems, which is something incredibly understanding coming from my perspective specifically as an older sibling. Marianne was also a spark of joy. She was so charming and funny in the novel. Like, obviously she did stupid things, but I think those stupid things were done charmingly. Like, she was really sweet and innocent, but at the same time a little bit extravagant, which I enjoyed. I went into this and I wasn't expecting much, but I ended up being really surprised. And I think that if you want to get the charm of Jane Austen, this is a really good book to pick up. The next book I read was Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is part of the Hunger Along, where every month we read a different book in the trilogy. I'm not going to spoil this. Basically, The Hunger Games, if you don't know, is a story that follows Katniss Everdeen, and she is thrust into the Hunger Games, where each year tributes are chosen from the children of the districts outside the capital. They are chosen to fight to the death, essentially, and this one follows Katniss as she enters the second Hunger Games in her lifetime. This is the second time reading this book, and I'm giving this a 4 stars. I'm unsure what I gave it back when I read it in 2012, but I do think that this is a very solid middle book. The excitement in this one was far higher, and obviously the stakes were higher. I really like what Suzanne did with the twists in this book. Some of my favorite characters appear in this book. Some of my favorite characters are developed, like Haymitch, Finnick, Joanna. Oh my god. I just really like the characters that are introduced in this book, and the ending broke me. I was at work, I was listening to it on audio, and the final scene when they're explaining like what happened to everybody at the end of the Hunger Games, I cried because I remembered what happens in Mockingjay, and I am not prepared to read it this month. So 4 stars, very good. Next, I read my most anticipated book of 2019, King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I ended up giving this a 4 stars. It wasn't a full 5 stars for me. This follows Nikolai after the events of the Grisha trilogy. If you haven't read the Grisha trilogy or the Six of Crows duology, you will not understand what's happening in this novel. It follows 3 points of view: Nikolai, Zoya, and Nina, and all of what happens to them is very intrinsic to what happens in those series. But basically, Nikolai and Zoya are my precious babies. Nina is my precious baby. I think I really let my excitement get to me. I still really enjoyed this, but not as much as I was really expecting to, because I was putting it on kind of a pedestal with Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, which I do feel are Leigh Bardugo's strongest works. I feel like my main gripe with this book is that Nina's storyline and then Nikolai and Zoya's storyline are so separated that I can't see any threads that would tie them together. They're so different that it was like being in Nikolai and Zoya's chapters, which are very related. I was getting more into the story, following along, and then it would cut and it would insert Nina's chapters, which are so very different from the rest of the novel. But on the other hand, I did really enjoy the ending of this book. If you know, you know. I'm gonna insert a picture here that implies what I'm implying, and if you know, then you know what this picture means in this book. But other than that, I love Zoya with every fiber of my being. She is my everything, my queen. I want her to rip my face off. I love her so much. This book was really good, and I'm excited. The ending, I just don't know how she's gonna tie everything together. I really don't see it. I'm very worried, but regardless, 4 stars. Loved it. Then I finally read Saga Volume 9 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a series that is kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation, where a woman and a man from 2 warring planets fall in love and have a child, and then they are on the run because they have produced said child. Obviously, we are 8 volumes in at this point. I'm not going to get into the details of this book, but I just want to say that this volume was absolutely perfect. It touched upon so many hard topics that need to be discussed within this type of format. Having hard topics like abortion and feminism written in an accessible format, a graphic novel format, makes it easier to spread to the masses. It was an examination on abortion rights, miscarrying, gender fluidity, and so many other topics that are like rarely discussed, especially all in like one kind of contained volume. It felt so positive and refreshing, and I just loved the way the story was told in this one. I feel like it flowed so beautifully. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to read Volume 9. We'll get there when we get there. I'm not ready. I will cry. The next books are what I read for the Contemporary-thon. I will link my vlog up above so that you can go watch it, because I did do a summary as to why I like these books. So the first book I read was My Brother's Husband Volume 2 by Gengaro Dagami. This is one of my favorite manga series. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. If you want to know my thoughts, you could click the link up above. Next, I read The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was too long. If you want more details, again, you can go watch my vlog. I also read Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. I thought this one was beautifully done. It's written in verse, it's very thought-provoking. It was very impactful. I read it as an audiobook, and Jason Reynolds is the one that narrates it. If you want to know what I thought, again, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. It's absolutely beautiful. Highly, 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 highly recommend the audiobook because it's fantastic. And finally for the week, I completed the Orange manga series with Orange Volume 2 by Ichiko Takano. I ended up giving this a 4 stars. It wasn't as strong as the first volume, I felt, but I still really, really, really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really cute ending. After that, I finished Dress Codes for Small Town. Is Leia in here?
No, baby. Right.
Say hi. Next, I read Dress Codes for Small Towns by Courtney Stevens. This is a contemporary novel that follows a young girl named Billy. She is the daughter of the town's pastor, and she has a large group of friends, all of which she is in love with, and she's just trying to find herself in this small town community in Kentucky. At first, it took a really long time to connect with Billy. It was super awkward in the beginning. I felt like just because you're thrown right into the story and you don't really get any background to any of the characters, but once I was in, I was in. This book was so good. Billy is a character that I really identify with. Billy is a character who comes from a religious family. She doesn't know what she wants. She is in love with all of her friends, boy or girl. I thought this was just such a beautiful story. This is such a short novel, but I feel like it impacts a lot of discussions within it, and I think that if you really enjoy contemporaries and you really enjoy kind of coming of age stories, this one is a really beautiful choice. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars just because the beginning was a bit slow. Next, I read The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is Mistborn Era 2. If you haven't read Mistborn, I highly recommend that trilogy. This is Era 2. It follows Wax and Wayne. They are two characters who are seen as kind of the law keepers of the fringes outside of the town. When Wax moves back into the city, he is trying to upkeep with this title that he has, and Wayne comes in to kind of pull him back in. Shenanigans ensue. Wax and Wayne discover some plot that's happening in the town, and it goes from there. I gave this 3.5 stars. I was a bit disappointed by the book. I don't think it was as developed as the Era 1 trilogy. The Era 1 trilogy sucked me right the fuck in. I loved all the characters. I cared about all of them. In this one, I was kind of indifferent to the characters. I was still affected, like when certain things happen. I was still very intrigued, and I wanted to finish this book. I just wasn't as entranced with it as I was with the first Era. But I heard that this one is everybody's least favorite and the other ones are so much better, so I'm excited to continue this series. I think Sanderson's a brilliant author, so I don't see where he can let me down. Next, I read Out of My Skin by Tessa McWatt. I gave this one a 2.5 stars. This is about a girl named Daphne who, coming through the adoption system, she really wants to find out where she comes from. Her parents are two white people, and she doesn't feel like they truly understand where she's coming from. So she moves to Montreal in search of whatever's left from her biological family, and at the same time the Oka crisis is occurring in Montreal. If you don't know what the Oka crisis is, it is when a piece of Mohawk burial grounds were being disputed with our government because they wanted to extend a golf course in Oka, and obviously the indigenous community was upset with this. It was a 78-day standoff here in Montreal. It happened before I was born. It is still an ongoing process that never really ended. And what's interesting is that Daphne's life is put in parallel to this Oka crisis. And while I thought that that was an interesting aspect to the novel, I think it was kind of the only interesting aspect to the novel. It could be because I was going into this knowing that I would have to do a presentation on it, so I was far more critical in reading it. But I just don't think it was well developed and well written. I think McWatt did an interesting thing with metaphors in this and always paralleling Daphne to every single situation she encounters with. And I did appreciate how this kind of travels through, and at the end Daphne reconciles with herself and with where she stands with our country. It took me 10 days to read a 200-page book. Like, this is so short. It just wasn't captivating, wasn't interesting, and I feel bad giving it the rating that I did. After that, I needed something light because I was so fed up with schoolwork. So I read Orange Future by Ichiko Takano. This is a little small manga that comes after Orange Volume 2. You don't necessarily need to read it, but I just needed something light, and I cried. I gave this 4.5 stars. It was just so cute. It follows Suwa, who isn't the main character in the first 2 volumes. He's kind of the best friend figure in the novel. And I love him. I love everything about him. He is perfect, and he is the reason why I cried. He is so cute. I can't talk about him enough. I love him. This was so cute. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't give it a full 5 stars because it was a bit confusing in the beginning to understand like where this book was coming from. If you read this series, then you know it's a discussion on time and parallel universes. So yes, the beginning of this novel was a bit confusing, but at the end I was just bawling my eyes out. It was perfect. I have nothing else to say. We're almost at the end. One of the last books I read for the month was White Noise by Don DeLillo. I gave this 2 stars. This was just another example of a book that I don't like from my classic American literature class. This is a story that follows a family as they navigate escaping from this airborne toxic event that's happening, and it's a discussion on fear of death and what happens when death is directly in front of you and you need to face your fears. It was interesting. I'll give Don DeLillo this. I think he's a really talented writer. I wouldn't say that his writing or his choice in words was the problem that I was having in this book. I just thought this book was so boring. I'm sorry if you like this book, but could have been better. And finally, the last book I read in February was 21 Things You Might Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Ross. This bitch did not just say Bob Ross. It's Bob Joseph. Not our beloved painter Bob Ross. Bob Joseph. Oh my god. This is basically exactly what the title says. It is 21 things that are listed in the Indian Act that controls the lives of Indigenous communities here in Canada, and he goes in depth into these laws and the redactions that we've had and how the laws go back and forth. A lot of explanation, a lot of Canadian history in here. If you're really interested in how our government zips through laws, how many redactions we've had on laws, how long some laws lasted, because I think a lot of people would be really surprised. This was brilliant. It was only 180 pages, very small, but I think that that made it better. It made it easier, I think, for people to pick up. They'd be more inclined to pick up a nonfiction book that's very short, and I think that the format of the book, where he goes into the laws, was extremely simple, and the language was very easy to understand. This book is fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Loved it, read it in one sitting. It was great. So let me try carrying all the books that I read in the month of February. Is it a video? Unless they fall, no. But that's it for this video. Like and subscribe, dislike, comment down below what you read in the month of February. Comment down below if you think that I'm wrong. Comment down below and let me know about your day. And I don't know how to end these things, so that's it for now. Bye!